Now I'm going to put it to you plain once again. Michael will get $250,000 and a Mercedes-Benz that will be forgotten in a year. But he gets a piece of the revenue of the shoe and all future Air Jordan shoes. A shoe is just a shoe until my son steps into it.
Hey everyone, it's me, Vic. I'm an artist that customizes on sneakers on my YouTube channel @SaylaVic, so go and check that out after you've watched this video. Now, I've been challenged to customize this pair of sneakers inspired by the new Amazon original movie, Air. So the color palette that I'm going to be using consists of a lot of warm tones and a paisley pattern that was inspired by one of my favorite characters in the movie, Dolores Jordan, who was also played by the one and only Viola Davis. So you're going to see a lot of elements of her character in the design of the shoes, including one of her quotes from the movie. Now, let's get to the fun part, customizing. Are you ready?
Let's get into this. First things first, let's get a good look at the canvas we'll be working on. This high-top sneaker has many panels that we can use to map out our colorway. If you don't already know, a colorway is the combination and arrangement of colors on a sneaker that make it immediately distinguishable from other styles of the same model. The colorway I'll be creating on the sneaker is inspired by the iconic look on Dolores Jordan found on the Air movie poster and also in one of the most pivotal scenes in the movie. It will incorporate elements of earth tones and a signature paisley print that we'll paint on free-handed later. We'll get started by taking off the laces and prepping the surface of the sneakers with acetone. This will remove any factory finish that might prevent paint from sticking to the shoe. For good measure, since the uppers of these shoes are made of a synthetic material, I'm going to slightly sand the surface, also to promote the paint sticking onto the surface. Now it's time to mix the colors we'll be using for our colorway. I like to pre-mix the colors I know I'll be using a lot of into these separate bottles so that 1, my paint won't dry out, and 2, I'll always have this color to come back to if I do need to touch up at the very end. To ensure that the colors are mixed thoroughly, make sure to shake the bottles before application. Now let's get some colors on these shoes. The goal for the first layer of paint is making sure you get into the grooves and hard to reach spots, paying special attention to the areas around the stitches. Make sure to smooth out the paint so that the layer is thin. This will ensure that it doesn't look streaky or blotchy at the end. When it comes time for the next few layers, a trick I always use when painting with a brush is to alternate the direction of the streaks. So for the first layer, you swipe the brush horizontally. The second layer, you can swipe it vertically or diagonally. This will reduce any streaking that occurs with the layering. It typically takes between 4 to 6 layers of thin paint to get the opaque, solid coverage that I like. Next, there are a couple of synthetic rubber parts on the shoe that typically don't like to stick to the leather paint that I use. So instead, we're going to stain it with a dye. I'm using a black dye to color these components. The dye stains everything, so be very careful you don't get it on any parts of the shoe you don't want to permanently stain. Feel free to tape that up to cover it and protect it. Try not to stain your entire hand too, because that happens to me quite often. When painting, I move back and forth between the panels so that each layer of paint has sufficient time to dry in between. That way, I don't need to use a heat gun all the time. Sometimes, I even work on other parts of the shoes, like the tongue tag, when the paint dries. So let's do just that. We're going to create a custom tongue tag with the name of the movie, Air, on it, and one of my favorite quotes from Dolores Jordan.
A shoe is just a shoe until my son steps into it.
I am looking for an off-white piece of scrap leather that matches the rest of the shoe colorway that I can use to cut to size. This one looks like it'll do. I'll measure out how big I want the tongue and then cut it out. Now I'm hammering some pre-stitch holes with this leather hole puncher to line up the stitches when I'm ready to sew it onto the tongue. But before that, we need to align the stencil on the tongue tag and make sure that it's as center as possible. Now, when I designed the tongue tag, it didn't occur to me just how small the quote underneath was going to be. No stencil printer is going to be able to cleanly cut those small letters out properly, so I'm just using this as a rough letter guide. We'll have to go in and freehand the letters afterwards. I'm using a Q-tip to stamp on the paint, making sure not to overload the Q-tip so that it doesn't seep underneath the stencil. We're going to use white so that it creates a nice base for the color on top to pop, but also if there's any bleeding, it's going to be lightly colored and easy to fix. A shoe is a shoe until my son steps into it. These letters are so unbelievably small, but at least the quote packs a big meaning, right? Alright, now for the fun part, and also the part I've been procrastinating until the end because, to be perfectly honest, I'm a little anxious about this. But we're gonna do it anyways. Since the background of this panel is a dark brown, let's use a light color paint to sketch out the paisley pattern. I'm kind of just freehanding, doodling, and making this up as I go. I like the organic shapes that freehanding gives, and because we're not trying to be perfectly symmetrical, the entire pattern can be unique across both sneakers, so no single panel is going to be identical. Time to add some color. So we're coloring in the paisley, and I'm starting off with a variation of warm earth tones like taupes, orange, brown, red, and beige. Mixing some of these shades will give me a wide range of colors to use as we fill in the colors. Have fun with this part. It's like coloring in a coloring book. It's so therapeutic. I try to go over each color in at least 2 to 3 coats so that the color is solid and pops on top of the dark background. And then lastly, I like to just go over the outlines of these shapes one more time to make sure that the design is nice and crisp. And after a couple of hours, well, maybe more than just a couple, this is what it looks like. I think it turned out really beautiful. What do you think? And let me know how you like this colorway inspired by the Air movie poster.
You guys, these turned out so cool. I'm really happy with how they look. I hope you guys like this Air-inspired colorway, and thank you so much for following along as I customize these. Air was such an incredible movie, especially as a sneaker artist. It was so cool to see the origin of the sneaker that started it all, and I absolutely love all of the characters in the film as well. Make sure to go check out Air, now streaming on Prime Video. Again, it's me, Vic, from C'est La Vic, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!